Okay, now that we've gone out and completed and test fired our Polymer 80 AR-15 lower receiver, now I'm going to recap the whole thing, or my opinions on this whole situation. Okay, as I said in my Polymer 80 Glock builds, it's probably the easiest of the projects out of all of the 80% build is the Glock. Next up would be this Polymer 80 Polymer AR lower. The reason this one's a bit more difficult is you do have to have a drill press or something and a vise to clamp this down, and you have to basically machine out your trigger group pocket is what you have to do. So this makes the build a tad bit more difficult than like the simple pistol build. You're gonna need machinery and equipment to do this. Now, how this compares to an aluminum 80% build is, for I think I paid $80-some for the Polymer 80 kit. You get a plastic jig like the pistol build, and you get an end mill and all the drills you need to drill it out in the kit. One price, that's it. You don't have to buy drills or a fixture, where with the aluminum ones, you know, it's usually the price for the aluminum 80%, you have to buy some sort of fixture and you have to buy the tooling extra, the drills, end mills, all that. All of this comes with the Polymer 80 kit. So as far as the AR builds go, the least expensive to get as a kit is the Polymer 80. And everything is there. Actually, I've been using the drills out of the Polymer 80 kit to finish an aluminum lower. Okay, so it's a good deal. Now, pros and cons on this. Alright, even though you need machinery and a drill press and that, the Polymer AR lower would probably be simpler and or less, easier to do than aluminum. In other words, this plastic stuff will cut easier if you watch what you're doing. You still have to use machining principles. You still have to not climb mill, just conventional mill when you're, you know, feeding it with your little crank on your vise or something. You still have to use some basic machining skills to do this, but it can be done relatively probably simpler than an aluminum receiver. Okay, so once you get past that, get this thing machined out and everything, alright, let's talk about the durability and the function, because we finally got out. I went and tried it. I got 100, and it wasn't a full box, so it was like 115 rounds through this, and I got it to work. And there were no problems other than the magazine acted up, and I think one cartridge got stuck. But that was because I was using used magazines I got out of a pile. One of the mags malfunctioned with the feeding, but I took all the ammunition, even the cartridges that weren't feeding, put them in a magazine that I ran through to work, and all of them went off without a problem. That's in a video prior to this. So we got it to function, but now another critical thing. Out of the four, I made a video where I took 4 or 5 different uppers and tried fitting them onto this lower, okay? And I believe I found a problem, or I had problems. I had to fit the upper to the lower, okay? I had to remove material from this in an area we did not machine, okay? Because what was happening is when I tried to put the uppers on, the front pin would go and latch onto the front of the receiver, and when I swung it down to put the rear pin to lock it in, I would be hitting in a couple different areas. So I had to file this, and the pin would not lock into place. I mean, I'd have to tap it or something, and then it creates pressure, and I mean, I had to drive it out with a punch, so that was unacceptable. Now, the biggest complaint on the Polymer, we all know Polymer is not going to be a material that is structurally as durable as aluminum. Okay, we all know that. Everybody knows that. But what was happening is it was binding. I mean, I'm going to change the camera around. We're going to look at what I had to do to get it to work. Okay, so hopefully I can do this. What was happening is when I first noticed in this area right in here, the upper was binding against it and was leaving marks on the top part. Okay, so I had to file some of this off in here first and started to get it down. Then it would go down all the way, but then I noticed still you had to hammer the pin in. It was quite difficult. And if you look at the receiver, there's a little area here in the casting that's kind of raised up. And right in here, I had to really remove some material over the top of the hole for that pin. That, you know, after I carved out all of this here and there, I might have been in a little bit of a hurry. I carved out the radius here, and you can actually see it's not touching. And it's kind of flush up on this, the back end of the upper. Well, I still could not, the pin would drag until I removed material from the top over in here where, if you can see it in the casting, it ends about here. This, it's like a raised surface. Now I checked the instructions and they didn't say anything about fitting the frame or the lower to the upper receiver, but it wouldn't go on. So when I got the one I was going to use on here after modifying it, I noticed it would drag. And I have one upper that actually hangs up. When you pull it back, it hangs up. And I found one, fortunately, that went smoothly, and that one operated smoothly, and I took it out and fired it. So, what I'm trying to say is, and this is kind of a dual problem, the critical point on these, or why people doubt the polymer receivers, is they have a tendency to crack in this area, this raised up back part here. This is where it fails. This is where your buffer tube screws into the threads, and you tighten down that back plate to secure the tube with the castle nut here. Now these things get loose on all guns. I've always had trouble with them. You know, you just got to tighten them up. And I think it's a combination of two things that causes the failure of this receiver. One, people over tighten this, and two, if it's binding up like it was, putting pressure up here, and if you don't modify this receiver, that when you drive this pin to get it to lock, you're putting constant pressure like backwards on this. And then plus combined with pressure from your castle nut on the top, you're creating a pinch point, okay? And if you force it and it doesn't move freely, then it's going to go, and eventually probably it would make this crack. Okay, I can see where that's a problem. The stress, even though you get it together and it fits real tight, from firing it, the stress would probably crack this. And I've seen people over tighten stuff on a lot of these polymers, both the uppers and the lowers, and I think that's a problem. So use, you know, relatively normal force, and if it loosens up, just keep the wrench handy what you can keep tightening it, because it does it on my rifles that I build out of aluminum. Or you can put like Teflon tape on the tube to kind of get that castle nut to bear down on something where it'll lock into place. Okay? So my advice is get your upper completed. Then once you complete this lower, try test fitting it. Don't force it. Don't bash it. Actually try to see where it's rubbing, and then just gently remove material until you can get it to lock, and then it should. Now when I forced that one upper where I was tapping this pin in with a hammer, the gun functioned well. But then after I removed material in both this area and this area, and then down in the radius here, I got it to fit in there quite easily, where, you know, you just use finger pressure to take your takedown pins in and out. It would bind a little. So it's kind of like, I'm not quite sure either, because like I said, I fitted 4 different uppers to this. A couple of them just barely bound up, went on easily, just like a normal thing. Bound slightly. One bound up completely, and if you flexed it or moved it, it would, I'll put a link to the video or a card for that video in here. And I had that one kind of questionable upper that went on here and it functioned fine. So you may have to fit this lower or test fit it. I haven't quite figured out exactly why. They should be tight enough of a tolerance where that shouldn't be a difference, but for some odd reason, they don't all fit the same. Okay, that's something I haven't figured out yet. But if you do get it to fit to the lower, and the thing functions and there's no drag or anything, this thing works fine. Just, not a lick of problem right at the moment. How durable it is and how long it will last, I'm not quite sure. And I'm not going to go put 4,000 rounds. I've heard people saying that they have built a lightweight rifle with a polymer lower and a polymer upper, had fired 3,000 rounds out of it, and for over a period of years. And then what happened is on the upper, where the little block is up in the front of the upper, that snapped off after a time. But he didn't say anything about the lower failing. So, in our discussions with the lower failing, I can see where that's a problem if this is binding and you're cranking the nut down, where that would break this piece eventually, put a lot of stress on it. And then firing the rifle is more stress. But to me, without no drag and the way it fit, this thing functioned all right. There was no malfunctions other than the magazine. And also, another point, my trigger and hammer pins, after 100 rounds, I think the lower trigger pin may have walked a little. Okay, worked itself out. That wasn't a problem. I've had some aluminum receivers that one magazine, the pin would walk out, They didn't walk out that bad. Okay, my opinion overall on this. There are commercially made polymer guns. There were 2 or 3 companies that made them. Some as recently as 2018. Okay? And there was one years ago, I remember seeing it, they were trying to build a super lightweight AR. And it's going back maybe 6 years, 8 years ago, a while. There was another company that made them. I've seen completed polymer AR-15 lowers for sale. Okay? I recently picked up a couple polymer AR uppers. My intention is to kind of put together a polymer gun with a lower and upper and try to build a lightweight rifle and see how durable it is, okay? Just out of curiosity. A lot of people, and it's the truth. The truth is, yes, this material is not as strong as aluminum. And yes, you can go and buy a completed aluminum lower receiver, strip lower for $60, less than the time, hassle, and that fooling with this thing. But it is interesting, and like I said, if you're a hobbyist and you like tinkering with things, even though I had my doubts about this whole thing, I kind of did it anyway, just to give my opinion, just a person that I wasn't looking to make it work. I was just trying to see, honestly, with a clear mind, what a project like this and what you would end up with. Actually, this polymer frame is pretty sturdy, okay? I mean, there's a little bit, something in here is a little bit wobbly and not quite dead true flat. But with a little bit of work and patience and taking your time, you can build something. And like I said, all of this for me is an experiment to try to prove this out. I had my doubts at first. I was expecting this thing would break apart or wouldn't go together well and that, which it kind of didn't go together well. But this is my first attempt, and I wasn't quite, well, I wasn't prepared. I thought once I did the pocket, this thing should just go together and work, and well, it wasn't. And I had to do some modifications to it. So be warned, that's why I'm making the video, is to inform you. Don't get in a rush when you do this. Have your upper completed. Do the lower, assemble it, get it working, then fit it together, and take your time and just remove a little bit of material in these areas. And even though it's black, you can see when you push down where it's rubbing against the, or just hold it up to the light and look, and you can see where it's rubbing. And then just file. I suggest using a file. Using a Dremel tool will just really hack it up and make it look like crap. Using a file, I kind of a crappy job on this, but I got it to work. Okay. Probably a little bit more research and other people making videos on this. Now, I've seen people put them together and fire them. Now, I just did the video prior to this. Like I said, about 120 rounds, no problem. But that's with the one of the 4 or 5 uppers that fits on here with no problem. You know, if I put another upper on there that binds a little, I might have constant failures. So, it's an honest opinion of this. So there may be a little bit of fitting in the end. So it's best get the lower done, get your upper complete and ready, then try to fit the upper to this, okay, and see how it goes. But as far as these 80% lowers are, yes, it's not going to be as durable or the same strength as aluminum, but you get everything needed in the kit, you know, other than the drill press and the vise and stuff. You get all the tools in it, and you get a fixture, all for 80 bucks, which isn't a bad deal. And if you go on and want to use those tools to finish an aluminum one, if you wish to advance into that level, which I'm going to do next, you got the drills and everything right there, and they are good high-speed steel drills. Okay, they're not Chinese ones or whatever. Who knows? Maybe they're all made in China, but they're better quality than what you see in the Glock kits. They're just standard drills. So that's my opinion on this. Like I said, again, something like this isn't for everybody. If you have a difficult time, you know, if you're not into doing it yourself and learning, you know, and then again, you can learn too. You know, you might scrap one of these, but after a while you can get to it. It's not a bad project, and the thing appears to work fairly well if it's done and fitted right. Okay, I'll fool around more with these polymer guns when I get time and see how durable they are, because really you don't see many people shooting them. There's a couple videos where the guys were testing the commercial guns that were polymer, okay, and shooting them, and one fella does go and build, I think, a Polymer 80 lower, and goes out and fires the rifle a little bit, you know, and that's it. No follow-up, no how durable it is, you know, and that's why I tried to get at least 100 rounds through it, you know, instead of just 10. So that's where we are on this project here, okay, and stay tuned. And like I said, I'm going to try eventually to build a polymer upper and lower, make a lightweight gun, something just for the hell of it, you know, and see how durable it is. Maybe I'll just take it out and let people shoot it and try to get a bunch of rounds through it and see how long it lasts.